The stars outside the observation window shone like scattered diamonds, each one distant, cold, and silent. Captain Lyra stood on the bridge of her small exploration ship, the Aetheris, staring at the vast black void. She had been assigned to investigate a drifting vessel detected near the edge of the Lyran Nebula, a place few humans dared to explore. The ship's movements were erratic, almost as if it were caught in the nebula's gravitational currents, and it had no response to any hails. Something about it bothered her, a small unease that settled in her chest. She had seen abandoned ships before, wrecks of long-lost vessels, but there was something different about this one. It felt deliberate. As her ship slowly approached, she could make out the hull. It was old, worn by time, yet somehow intact. Rust streaks marred its surface, and its shape was unusual, angular, unlike the standard human design she was familiar with. The sensors detected no life forms on board, yet the readings showed something odd. Faint, irregular life signs coming from deep within the ship. Lyra's brow furrowed. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured to herself. "How can there be life signs here if this ship is centuries old?" She activated the docking sequence and maneuvered the Aetheris carefully. The ship groaned under her touch, metal scraping metal, as her docking clamps latched onto the derelict vessel. The airlock interface responded sluggishly, flickering with warning lights. She could feel the tension in her own body, a mixture of excitement and caution. Once inside, the ship was dark. The emergency lights barely illuminated the narrow corridors, casting long shadows that made the place feel larger than it was. Dust floated in the air, and the faint hum of the ship's failing power system echoed through the halls. Lyra's boots clicked against the metal floor as she moved cautiously, her hand resting on her blaster, not that she expected to use it. She followed the life sign readings to the central chamber. There, in the middle of the room, was a cryogenic pod. Its glass dome was fogged with condensation, but she could see a figure inside. A human, perfectly preserved, floating in the bluish glow of the pod. Her sensors immediately scanned the occupant, and Lyra's eyes widened as she read the data. The pod system identified him as Adrian Kellen. His file, preserved in a corrupted but readable state, stated that he had died over 300 years ago. His birth date, last mission records, and final report all confirmed it. According to history, Adrian Kellen had been a human explorer who disappeared during a long-range mission, never to be seen again. Yet here he was, alive in cryogenic sleep, and the life signs showed a faint but steady heartbeat. Lyra stepped back, trying to comprehend the impossible. "How is this even possible?" she whispered. She repeated the scan to ensure it wasn't a system error. The readings were consistent. Vital signs were present, the pod's life support was still functional, and the records clearly labeled him as deceased centuries ago. Her curiosity outweighed her fear. She needed answers, and she needed them now. The pod's controls were old yet functional. With careful adjustments, she began the awakening sequence, aware that it could be dangerous. If the human inside reacted violently after 3 centuries of sleep, there would be no one to stop him. Minutes passed like hours. The pod hissed and released cold vapor as the temperature stabilized. Then the dome slowly lifted, and the human inside began to stir. Lyra held her breath. His eyes fluttered open, bright and alert, scanning the room as if he had just woken from a short nap rather than 3 centuries of isolation. "Captain, Lyra." His voice was calm, steady, and familiar. Lyra froze. The man's words cut through her like a blade. "How do you know my name?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. He sat up slowly, studying her with an intensity that was almost unnerving. "Because I have known you and I have waited for you," he said simply. There was no fear, no confusion in his tone, only certainty. Her hand instinctively moved to her communicator. "This is impossible. According to all historical records, you—" "I am here," he interrupted gently, his eyes meeting hers. Everything else is just paperwork. The records, they don't tell the truth of what happened. Lyra stepped closer, scanning him again. He looked human, normal in every way, yet there was something about him that seemed different, almost timeless. His movements were precise, controlled, as if he had not been in sleep for centuries. He seemed complete, whole, and entirely present. I need to understand this, she said, finally regaining some composure. Your file says you died over 300 years ago. Everything says it. How are you alive? Adrian stood and stretched, his gaze still fixed on her. The file is correct in the sense that I did not age normally. My mission went wrong and I was trapped in a temporal stasis. Time moved differently for me. For the rest of the universe, I was gone. For me, I was waiting. Lyra's mind spun. Temporal stasis, a 300-year sleep, somehow still alive and coherent. She had studied time dilation in theory, but nothing could have prepared her for this human, this living anomaly. Then she noticed something even more shocking. The ship's AI displayed a notice she hadn't expected. Adrian Kellen is legally married to Captain Lyra, authorized by Interstellar Registry 3C229X. Her eyes widened. She stared at the display. Married to me. Adrian nodded, calm as ever. Yes, I am bound to you. I always was. Lyra took a step back, trying to process it. She had no memory of this, no personal record or recollection of any marriage, yet the files and AI insisted it was real. The documents contained legal seals, signed agreements, and evidence of a ceremony she did not remember attending. Why would this exist? I don't remember anything, she exclaimed. You will, Adrian replied softly. Time has its way of revealing what was hidden. All of it, our bond, our connection, it has always been real, even if you cannot see it yet. Lyra shook her head, still in disbelief. Her fingers hovered over the console. This doesn't make sense. How can a human from 300 years ago be married to me now? How? Before she could finish, the pod emitted a warning signal. The life support system was unstable. The pod had preserved him, but now the centuries of minor damage were catching up. Adrian's movements were swift and practiced. We need to stabilize the system. I can help. As he approached the controls, Lyra noticed how familiar his touch seemed, as if he had handled these instruments countless times before. With careful adjustments, they stabilized the pod and the warning lights dimmed. The room fell silent for a moment. Lyra studied him, her mind racing. She could feel something stirring, a strange mixture of disbelief, curiosity, and a pull she couldn't explain. His calm presence, his certainty in a world she thought she understood, it unsettled her. I don't know what to think, she admitted. You say you know me, you say we're married, but I don't remember any of it. I don't even know if I can trust this ship's AI. Adrian looked at her, his eyes unwavering. Trust is earned, Lyra, not from files or records, but from actions. I will prove it to you. One step at a time. First, we survive this room. Then everything else will make sense. Lyra nodded slowly, the tension in her body easing slightly. Somehow, despite all the impossibilities, she felt a spark of trust. Not complete trust, but enough to act together. She knew the ship's records, his existence, and the centuries of unanswered questions were all dangerous. But danger had always been part of her life. The silence was broken by a soft chime from the ship's AI. Warning. External scans detect approaching vessels. Unknown origin. Likely hostile. Recommend immediate evacuation. Lyra's heart raced. It seemed the ship was not as abandoned as it had appeared. We're not alone, she said, her voice tight with tension. Adrian glanced at the readings. They've been following this ship for centuries, he said quietly. They knew I existed. They may not know you do, but they will. Fear and adrenaline mixed in Lyra's chest. She realized this mission was no longer simple exploration. It was survival and perhaps much more. Somehow this human, this man who should not exist, was now her responsibility, and possibly the key to understanding something far larger than herself. Together, they prepared to leave the room, the past, present, and future colliding in a moment of uncertainty. Outside, the nebula swirled in colors she had never seen before, a reminder that the universe was vast, unpredictable, and full of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. As they made their way to the escape pods, Lyra could not help but glance at Adrian again. His presence was a puzzle, a living testament to humanity's potential to endure, to survive against time itself. Somehow, she knew that waking him was just the beginning. The story was only starting, and their destinies were now linked in ways neither of them could fully understand. She took a deep breath and nodded at him. "Then let's find out what comes next." Adrian offered a faint smile, a quiet reassurance that cut through the fear and confusion. "Together, Lyra. Whatever comes next, we face it together." And for the first time, Lyra allowed herself to believe that the impossible might be real, and that the human floating in Cryo before her was more than a relic of the past. He was the future. The escape pods shuddered as they detached from the drifting vessel, moving quickly through the swirling colors of the nebula. Lyra gripped the controls tightly, her knuckles white, while Adrian sat beside her, calm and observant. Though he had just awakened from a 300-year slumber, he handled the emergency procedures with a skill that suggested experience far beyond the records. "Who were they?" Lyra asked, her voice tight with tension. "The ships that were approaching the derelict." Adrian's eyes scanned the instruments, his gaze steady. "They have been searching for me for centuries," he said quietly. "A faction that wanted the knowledge I carried, knowledge that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. They are not here for exploration or diplomacy. They are here to control or destroy." Lyra swallowed hard. Her mind raced with the implications. If Adrian had survived centuries in Cryo, guided by his mission, then this faction had waited just as long. They would be patient, relentless, and dangerous. "Why haven't they found you before?" she asked. Adrian hesitated, his expression shadowed. "I was careful. I traveled hidden routes, avoided sensors, and relied on the stasis to keep me from being detected. But the moment I awakened, my signature became visible again. That is why they will come for us now." The pod jolted violently as a warning light flashed on the dashboard. "Something S on our tail," Lyra said. She swiveled the scanner, trying to identify the threat. A fleet of small, agile ships appeared, their dark forms darting through the nebula, closing in fast. Adrian leaned forward, studying the projections. "They are not heavily armed, but they are smart. They will try to trap us, cut off escape routes, and force us into surrender. We need to be faster and cleverer." Lyra nodded. She had always relied on her instincts in dangerous situations, but now she felt the weight of centuries of history pressing down on her. She glanced at Adrian. Even after centuries of sleep, his calm presence was grounding, a strange reassurance in the chaos. She had expected confusion, hesitation, or fear, but instead he projected focus, strategy, and quiet confidence. They maneuvered the pods through the nebula, weaving between clouds of gas and magnetic storms that sent sparks dancing across the instruments. Lyra's hands moved with precision, following the patterns Adrian suggested. Each decision, each twist and turn seemed to extend the small lead they had over the pursuing ships. "How do you know these routes?" Lyra asked, astonished. "They aren't on any modern star maps." Adrian smiled faintly. "I traveled them centuries ago. These paths were secret, used only by a few. I remembered them, even in stasis." The pod shook again, more violently this time, and a beam of energy struck the hull, sending Lyra stumbling against the seat. She cursed under her breath. "They're faster than I thought." Adrian placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Focus on the turns. Let the nebula do the work. They will follow, but the storms will slow them. Trust the patterns, trust your instincts." Together, they threaded the pod through the labyrinthine clouds. Lyra marveled at Adrian's knowledge, how he seemed to anticipate every move of their pursuers. Despite the danger, A part of her felt the stirrings of connection, a bond forming not from memory but from shared struggle. Hours passed, or what felt like hours, though time in the nebula was difficult to measure. At last, the fleet of pursuers fell behind, their ships unable to maintain speed through the shifting magnetic fields. Lyra allowed herself a deep breath. "We're safe for now," she said, leaning back in her seat. Her hands shook slightly, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Adrian nodded. "Safe is temporary. They will regroup and they will come again. We need a secure location, somewhere to rest, repair, and plan our next move." Lyra considered the options. The nearest friendly colony was several light-years away, and traveling there directly would risk detection. Then she remembered an old, abandoned station she had explored early in her career. It was a forgotten outpost, far from common trade routes with minimal sensors. It might provide the cover they needed. "Then we head to the Haven station," she said, inputting the coordinates. "It's not much, but it's hidden." The journey was tense but uneventful, the nebula providing cover as they navigated toward the station. When they arrived, the station's silent corridors and empty docking bays felt almost peaceful after the chaos of pursuit. The pod docked, and Lyra carefully guided Adrian inside. The station smelled of old metal and disuse. Dust hung in the air, disturbed only by their movements. Lyra set down her bag and began scanning the station for damage, trying to make it livable for the time being. Adrian wandered the corridors, studying the architecture, the systems, the old AI interfaces. "This place is abandoned, yet structurally sound," he remarked. "It could serve as a base for a while. We can repair communication arrays, monitor the surrounding space, and plan our next steps." Lyra nodded. "And the records I still don't understand. Why does your file say you were married to me? How could that have happened centuries ago?" Adrian's expression softened. "That is part of the story you do not yet remember. Time has hidden it from you, but it is real. The bond was arranged for a purpose that has endured across generations. You are part of it, and so am I." Lyra frowned. "I don't remember anything like that. I don't even know if I can believe it." "You will," Adrian said gently. "Memory is not always reliable. Records, documents, and laws preserve what the mind forgets. The bond between us exists beyond memory, beyond time. It is legacy." Lyra's mind swirled with thoughts. A legacy of marriage she did not remember, a human alive after centuries, a faction hunting them across space. She felt overwhelmed, yet there was a part of her that wanted to believe him. Something about the certainty in his eyes, the calmness in his voice, gave her hope. Over the next days, they worked together to restore parts of the station. Adrian's knowledge of long-lost technologies amazed Lyra. He repaired energy conduits, recalibrated sensors, and reactivated communication systems using methods she had never encountered. Every action he took reminded her that humanity, even centuries ago, had achieved incredible things. One evening, after a long day of repairs, they sat in the observation deck, staring at the stars. The nebula spread before them like a canvas of color and light. Lyra felt a quiet calm, yet she could not shake the sense of urgency. "They will come again," Adrian said softly, breaking the silence. "We cannot underestimate them. The knowledge I carry is dangerous to those who would misuse it." "I understand," Lyra replied. "But why would you trust me? You have waited centuries, and now you are awake. How do you know I will act with you?" Adrian looked at her steadily. "Because humanity is capable of courage and intelligence. Because I have seen it in your ancestors, and I see it in you. You will act, you will survive, and together we will protect what must be protected." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something about him, something that made her feel both safe and challenged. She realized that surviving the nebula, escaping the pursuers, and restoring the station were only the beginning. The real challenge was understanding the connection between them, the reason for his survival, and the purpose of their bond. Over the following weeks, Lyra and Adrian began to piece together fragments of the past. Adrian shared knowledge of civilizations long forgotten, technologies lost to time, and missions that shaped the galaxy's history. He spoke of human potential, the ability to endure, adapt, and grow stronger even in the face of centuries of isolation. Through their work, Lyra began to feel a subtle shift. She could not remember the marriage, yet she sensed it in small ways. The ease with which Adrian understood her decisions, the unspoken coordination in their actions, the silent reassurance that they were in this together. She realized that perhaps legacy was more than legal records. It was instinct, intuition, and connection. One night, a sudden alert jolted them both. External sensors detected movement, small ships approaching the station at high speed. Lyra cursed under her breath. "They found us sooner than I expected." Adrian stood, his movements precise. "They are testing us. Probes, not attacks, yet we need to be ready." They moved to strategic positions, activating defensive arrays, hiding their exact location, and preparing for the unknown. As the ships came into sensor range, Lyra's heart pounded. Yet this time, she did not feel alone. Adrian's presence, steady and confident, gave her courage. Together, they would face whatever came. The stars outside the observation window remained cold and distant. Yet for Lyra, there was warmth in the room, a warmth born of trust, partnership, and a bond that even centuries could not break. She realized then that the mystery of Adrian's survival was only part of the story. The true story was how humanity, in all its resilience, could create connections that endured across time and space. And as the small fleet of unknown ships approached, she understood that the fight for survival, for knowledge, and for legacy had only just begun. The station trembled as the fleet of unknown ships drew closer, their shadows stretching across the observation window like dark predators against the nebula's glowing clouds. Lyra's fingers gripped the controls tightly, her heart racing, but there was no panic in her movements. She had faced danger before, yet this was unlike anything she had ever seen. These ships were relentless, silent, and calculated. Their target was clear: Adrian. Adrian stood beside her, calm and focused. He had already begun coordinating the station's limited defenses, rerouting power to shield generators and activating automated drones. "They are testing us," he said quietly. "We need to show them that we are not easy prey." Lyra nodded, her mind sharp. She had learned a lot from him over the past weeks. His centuries of experience, even in stasis, had given him a perspective she could not match, but she trusted her instincts, and together they had become a formidable team. The first wave of drones from the fleet approached, small, fast, and agile. Lyra maneuvered the station's automated turrets while Adrian guided the energy shields. The drones slammed against the shields, sparks flying, metal bending, but the station held. "They are testing every weak point," Adrian said, analyzing the readouts. "They want to see how we react. We cannot show fear." Lyra's hands moved rapidly, recalibrating the turret angles, predicting the drones' trajectories. Each shot was precise. Each shield adjustment was perfect. They moved in sync, their actions almost instinctive. It was as if some invisible bond connected them, something beyond memory, something rooted deep in human resilience. Hours passed. The fleet retreated temporarily, regrouping beyond sensor range. Lyra leaned back, exhausted but unbroken. Adrian watched her, his expression unreadable yet comforting. "They will return," he said. "We need more than defense. We need strategy." Lyra frowned. "Strategy. We are outnumbered. We don't have weapons like theirs, and they know we are here." Adrian's eyes glinted with determination. "We have something they do not: creativity, adaptability, and time. We can turn their strength into weakness if we act smart." They spent the next hours analyzing the fleet's patterns. Adrian explained long-lost tactics, ones that relied on patience, misdirection, and using the environment to one's advantage. The nebula itself became a tool. They created traps using magnetic storms, ion clouds, and gravitational anomalies. Each move was calculated, but it required courage, trust, and precise timing. When the fleet returned, they were ready. The ships moved in formation, but as they entered the nebula, they found themselves slowed by the magnetic storms Adrian had predicted. The ion clouds interfered with their sensors, and gravitational anomalies disrupted their formations. Lyra and Adrian watched from the station, guiding the automated drones to strike at critical moments. The fleet, confident at first, began to falter. Lyra could hardly believe it. The small station, abandoned and old, was holding its ground against centuries-old hunters. She glanced at Adrian, feeling a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "You really knew all of this would work?" she asked. Adrian smiled faintly. "I predicted the possibilities. You made them real." The fight escalated. The fleet, frustrated and now wary, attempted a direct assault. Energy beams struck the station, shaking its walls and sending sparks flying. Lyra's training and Adrian's guidance allowed them to dodge and counterattack with precision. Each move demonstrated the power of human ingenuity and resilience. They were outnumbered, but they were not outsmarted. During a brief lull, Lyra approached Adrian. "Why did they want you so badly?" she asked. "What knowledge do you have that could be so dangerous?" Adrian's expression darkened. Knowledge of ancient colonies, lost technologies, and secrets of human expansion. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could be used to control or destroy entire systems. That is why I was hidden, why I had to survive. Lyra nodded. She realized that the stakes were far higher than she had imagined. This was not just about survival, it was about protecting humanity's past, present, and future. And together, they were standing between the enemy and that legacy. The next wave of the fleet attacked with more aggression, but Lyra and Adrian anticipated it. Using a combination of the station's defensive systems and improvised tactics, they outmaneuvered the attackers. Beams of light cut through the nebula, drones collided with enemy vessels, and gravity traps forced several ships into unstable orbits. Adrian's calm presence never wavered. He guided Lyra with quiet confidence, predicting enemy moves and adapting strategies in real time. Lyra found herself relying on him not just for knowledge but for courage. There was something extraordinary about the way he had survived centuries and remained so focused, so human, yet almost beyond it. Hours turned into a full day of battle. Exhaustion weighed heavily on Lyra, yet she pushed forward, knowing that failure was not an option. Adrian, too, showed no signs of fatigue, his centuries-long experience giving him endurance that seemed almost superhuman. They moved together as a unit, anticipating each other's thoughts, covering each other's weaknesses, and striking where the enemy was most vulnerable. At last, the fleet began to retreat, unable to breach the defenses of the station. Lyra let out a long breath, the tension finally leaving her body. Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of warmth and reassurance. "They have learned to respect human unpredictability," he said with a faint smile. "But this is only the beginning. We cannot let our guard down completely." Lyra nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. "We did it," she said softly. "We survived together." Adrian's eyes met hers. "Together," he echoed. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a bond that had grown not from memory, but from trust, courage, and shared struggle. In the days that followed, they repaired more of the station and sent out signals to nearby friendly colonies, alerting them to the approaching threat. They shared knowledge and strategies, preparing for the possibility that the fleet might return stronger. But in the quiet moments, away from the sensors and alerts, Lyra began to feel something she could not explain, a connection to Adrian that went beyond survival. She remembered the files, the strange record of a marriage she had no memory of. And yet she began to wonder if perhaps it had been real, not in memory but in destiny. The way he understood her, the the way their actions synchronized perfectly, the quiet reassurance in his presence. It felt like the echo of a bond that had endured across centuries. One evening, as they sat on the observation deck watching the nebula's colors shift and swirl, Lyra finally spoke. "I still don't understand everything, Adrian. How you survived, why the marriage, why this connection exists. But I feel it. Somehow, I feel it too." Adrian turned to her, his expression gentle. "Memory is not the only proof of connection, Lyra. Actions, trust, courage, and understanding, these are just as real. Time may separate us, but humanity has a way of bridging that distance." Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she allowed herself to accept it. Not just the fact that he existed, but that he was a part of her story, a part of her life. She realized that the past, though hidden, had prepared them for this moment. And the future, though uncertain, could be faced together. Over the next weeks, they continued to fortify the station, train for possible attacks, and explore the nebula's hidden passages. Their partnership deepened, built on mutual respect, admiration, and the quiet understanding that they had survived against impossible odds. Every shared strategy, every close call, and every long discussion under the stars strengthened the bond between them. Then one day, after ensuring the station's defenses were secure, Adrian approached Lyra. "There is something you need to know," he said quietly. "The record of our marriage, it was real. Not just a ceremony, not just paperwork. It was a pact, a promise to protect humanity together. And now that we have met, that promise is alive." Lyra's eyes widened. She had felt the connection, but hearing him confirm it made it real in a way she could no longer deny. She nodded slowly, feeling a sense of completion, of destiny fulfilled. "Then we face the future together," she said. Adrian smiled, the faintest hint of relief in his expression. "Together," he agreed. As they stood on the observation deck, watching the nebula shimmer with light, they realized that the danger had passed for now, but the universe was vast, full of unknown threats and mysteries waiting to be discovered. Yet they faced it not as isolated individuals, but as partners, bound by trust, courage, and a connection that even centuries could not erase. Lyra glanced at Adrian, her heart steady. She knew that their journey was only beginning. There would be challenges ahead, battles to fight, knowledge to protect, and truths to uncover. But she also knew that together, they could endure anything. Humanity had always survived by adapting, by being brave, and by trusting one another. And now in Adrian she had found the perfect embodiment of that enduring spirit. The stars outside the station continued to shine, cold and distant, yet within the walls of the small outpost, there was warmth, hope, and the quiet certainty of human resilience. For Lyra and Adrian, the impossible had become reality. The past and future had converged, and together they would lead humanity into a new chapter, stronger, wiser, and united in ways the galaxy had never seen before. And in that moment, as the nebula painted the sky with its brilliant colors, Lyra understood something profound. That even across centuries, across mysteries and impossible odds, humanity's greatest strength was not its technology, its knowledge, or its power. It was its heart, its courage, and its ability to form connections that could endure anything. Together they would face the stars, and together they would ensure that humanity's light would never fade.